You know, ever since Luke Skywalker and Ben Kenobi first mentioned the Clone Wars back on the world of Tatooine in the original Star Wars film, people have been wondering what that time period was all about. Naturally, the time slot has become one of the most popular and lucrative periods in the Star Wars chronology, and we've seen a huge influx of material in various mediums over the years. Some of it is very good, and some of it is quite poor, and some of it is a mixed bag with high points and low points. But my favorite series from this era has to be the Dark Horse Comics Clone Wars series, originally released back in 2003. This was a very adult take on the Clone Wars, which told rich stories, contained stunning artwork, and developed strong characters, both heroic and villainous, from both the prequel trilogy of films and the expanded universe. And so now I've decided to take a look back at this phenomenal work so I can reminisce with you fellow fans who remember it as fondly as I do, and to critique it and expose its failures and its triumphs to those of you who have never even read it before. So sit back and enjoy a look at Star Wars Clone Wars Volume 1, The Defense of Kamino, and Other Tales. This compilation contains 5 issues of varying degrees of quality. Sacrifice, the first of the 5 issues, takes place 1 month after the Battle of Geonosis, and begins the tale of one of my personal favorite Jedi, Quinlan Voss's dubious efforts over the course of the Clone Wars. He begins to infiltrate Count Dooku's inner circle of henchmen and criminals for the good of the Republic, but he must eventually choose whether or not to give in to his own desires or to place the needs of the Republic ahead of his own. And what's at stake is a vital piece of information that the Separatists wish to keep out of Republic hands, and Colleen, Quinn's love interest. I like that the story centers itself on not obscure characters, but not main characters in the forms of Quinn, Colleen, and Ayla. It's good that Obi-Wan and Anakin aren't the centerpiece of every single story. I like the artwork. The lighting is a bit dim for my tastes, but it really does serve to drive home the notion that they're in a dark, dank, smelly sewer, and it's pretty atmospheric. Gendra Summa penciled this issue, and of course anything she does is pretty much instantly recognizable for its superior quality to most other artists working on Star Wars material. This is one of the better issues in the volume in my opinion, and of the 5 stories, this is the only one that's not truly self-contained, as Quinlan's story expands into several other volumes as the Clone Wars rage on. Moving on to the Defense of Kamino, I actually consider this the weakest portion of the entire volume, despite the compilation being named for this section. The Defense of Kamino is broken up into 3 small stories, each detailing a massive assault on the cloning facilities found on Kamino. The first story is easily the best of the 3 in my opinion, as it has the best artwork and writing. It's less about the imminent invasion and more about the character progression. We get inside Obi-Wan's mind as he senses some sort of inner turmoil in Anakin, though he can't really tell what's troubling his Padawan since Anakin shuts him out in order to hide his secrets. Anakin is of course still conflicted about various issues that he doesn't feel he can share with his master, those being the loss of Qui-Gon Jinn, the death of his mother, his murders of the Sand People on Tatooine, his marriage to Padme, and his vengeful feelings towards Count Dooku. After an intelligence briefing for the squad of Jedi entrusted with the defense of the facility, Obi-Wan has a heart-to-heart with Quinlan Voss, who is delivering the intelligence report over their various Padawan problems. As Quinn managed to maintain a positive relationship with his former Padawan, Aayla Secura, Obi-Wan looks to him for guidance. Obi-Wan seems to be asking Quinn's advice on how to help better his relationship between himself and his student. It feels very much as though Kenobi is concerned for Anakin's well-being in this issue, rather than he's attempting to find yet another way to discipline or scold or lecture him about controlling his feelings. The issue ends with Anakin, Obi-Wan, and the others engaging in a fight against the Separatist fleet before becoming stranded in the middle of the ocean, only to be saved by one of the Kaminoans. The action seemed to be more of a byproduct of the rising tension, since we knew the Separatists had to attack at some point, but it doesn't really serve this storytelling in any respect. And it seems to be more of a device meant to explain why Anakin and Obi-Wan are away from the now vulnerable facility during the beginning of the next story. Overall, this issue is nothing stellar, but it's certainly far from bad. The story was pretty weak, but the character interactions serve a much-needed purpose and establish the Order of Jedi Knights, not just as masters and students, but as colleagues and friends. Unfortunately, the Defense of Kamino can only go downhill from here. In the next issue, entitled Jango's Legacy, it's revealed that Jedi Master Shaak-Ti has been tasked with the protection of the clone children and unborn fetuses, which are in grave danger as the droid army makes its landing. This issue introduces the ARC Troopers, or Advanced Recon Clone Troopers, who are trained by Jango Fett himself, and who carry hints of their template's personality, making them less predictable and a bit more human than most other clones. Just to go off on a small tangent here, this is how I like my clones. For the most part, they are capable, well-trained, quick-thinking drones who obey their commands rather emotionlessly. But a select few of them possess increased intelligence and individuality, yet they retain their status as simple clones and do not desire nicknames. I despise the individuality of the clone troopers in the new animated series. I hate that they separate themselves from one another, give each other haircuts and names. It's a clear attempt to mask the fact that each and every clone character that's given a name has a freaking action figure. A shameless marketing ploy. Now, that's all fine and good for the children who don't really concern themselves with these things, but to me it feels so out of place. Between the outcry against Hayden Christensen's portrayal of Anakin, the Jedi-murdering protagonist of The Force Unleashed, Galen Marek, and the fact that nobody cares about the stakes of a war when the fighters are droids and clones, I think that the writers of the Clone Wars have figured out that a lot of the recent protagonists in current Star Wars material have been either unlikable or hard to relate to. And I think that they've attempted to correct this by humanizing the clones in some fashion. But I think it's a lost cause. I don't feel anything for the clones, and I don't really want to. We know that each of these characters will eventually have a hand in the treacherous Order 66, and when all the chips are down, they're not really equipped with the same free will as a human being, and they're all going to fade into obscurity as nameless, ruthless stormtroopers. Why on earth would I want to invest myself in such characters? It's a waste of time. This is the reason why I actually like Alpha, as he is reluctantly named in the next volume by Anakin Skywalker. Anakin takes an interest in the clone, and his compassionate nature leads him to name his ally, though the clone really couldn't care less what he's called or what the Jedi think of him. He's very forward, he can be rude, and he's under no illusions about his status as a warrior whose job is to follow orders and achieve his goal by whatever means necessary. He's not here to make friends, he's here to get the job done, and that's what I like about him. So the story continues as the Separatists breach the cloning facilities, the ARC troopers are brought out of stasis to assist Shaak-Ti in the protection of the children. Eventually only one of them is left standing, and that of course is the aforementioned clone, who will later be named Alpha. Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker make their way back to the facility to aid Shaak-Ti and Alpha. Alpha resigns himself to destroying the unborn clone fetuses before the Separatists get their hands on them, and the Jedi resolve to find another way, and use the Force in a very cool scene to defeat the approaching droid forces. The story is decent, but it serves mostly to introduce the character Alpha, the only truly prominent clone we ever see in this series. And the artwork, while it has a few high points during the action sequences, really isn't up to par. The characters are too bulky, and for some reason Shaak-Ti is wielding a green lightsaber when she's always wielded a blue one in her other appearances. Anakin and Obi-Wan look nothing like themselves, and it's just an overall unappealing visual look to this issue. Overall, this is one of the weaker issues, but it served a purpose, told a decent story, introduced a new character, gave Shaak-Ti a little time in the spotlight, so it's not as bad as the final section of the Defense of Kamino, but it's still pretty underwhelming. The third and final entry in the Defense of Kamino story arc, No End in Sight, is a poorly conceived story which hinges on a separatist traitor in the ranks of the Republic-aligned Mon Calamari forces. Basically, sabotage is involved during a huge space battle, and the end result is a bittersweet one for both the Republic and Separatist forces. The Republic successfully manages to repel the invasion, but it becomes clear that the Clone Wars are just beginning, and the Jedi really don't know who they can trust anymore, and this is discussed in a sequence toward the end by Mace Windu and Yoda back on Coruscant in a scene echoing the end of Attack of the Clones. Meanwhile, Count Dooku and Sidious remark on the progress of the Clone Wars, and they voice their dissatisfaction with the end results of the assault on Kamino. There's really just not a lot of substance to this issue, and it just seems to repeat the ideas voiced by Yoda at the end of Attack of the Clones after a story in which none of the characters are sympathetic, previously established, or even revisited in the future issues of this series. The space battle was decent, and was easily the high point of this issue's artwork, as the character designs are just awful, and the coloring is a bit underwhelming. Yoda is way too tall and Mace is too short. All in all, this issue just felt like filler to me. I often skip it when I reread this volume. And so with that lackluster ending, the Defense of Kamino is now complete, and we'll move on to the final issue, Schism. In my opinion, this is a truly masterfully done comic. As with Sacrifice, this issue was written and penciled by the remarkable team of John Ostrander and Jan Duursema, respectively, and inked by the talented Dan Parsons. Schism is not a simple issue to discuss. It plays with a lot of Star Wars lore, gives insight into the Jedi both in terms of the politics involved within their order and their beliefs. It balances ideas from the films and expands on them to form truly rounded and interesting characters who really aren't given enough screen time in order to develop in the prequel trilogy. And it's extremely well put together, as it feels very cinematic from both a storytelling and artistic point of view. Schism hinges on a potential rift within the Jedi Order, as various factions of Jedi, each with differing views and feelings over the progression of the Clone Wars, find themselves at odds with the Council. The story begins as Mace and Yoda deliver a eulogy at a funeral pyre for a fallen Jedi Master after a battle. Shortly after this, they are greeted by Masters Thulm and his former Padawan, Master Quinlan Vos. The two bring news of a meeting of the Jedi emissaries from the various factions at the former lightsaber instructor of the temple, Jedi Master Sora Bulk's family estate, which he reclaimed after his disillusionment with the Jedi Order, following the Battle of Geonosis. This information is conveyed to Yoda and Mace Windu during a sparring match where Mace instructs Quinlan, who, at this point, had lost a good deal of his skill with the blade as a result of memory loss in a previous story arc, and had been recently re-educated by Sora Bulk in lightsaber combat. Mace notices variants of his own signature dueling style, Vapad, in Quinlan's form. This concerns him since Vapad is a dangerous and demanding practice for Jedi, and one that only Mace Windu himself has ever mastered properly. It is decided that Mace should be the Council's voice at the meeting with the dissident Jedi. Mace is conflicted, however, as Sora Bulk was once one of his most trusted friends, and helped him develop the fighting style of Vapad in the first place. Yoda counsels Mace and informs him that he must learn to look at the events around him with a child's eyes in order to overcome the dangers he faces. The setting then shifts to a training session on a faraway location, which first introduced the character Asajj Ventress, a powerful dark Jedi and commander of the Separatists who studies under and reports directly to Count Dooku. She is sent to Rule, the moon on which Sora Bulk's estate is located, in order to prevent Windu from rallying the dissident Jedi back to the Order. The meeting proceeds as planned, and it becomes clear that all is not what it seems. Not all the Jedi feel that they've allied with the right side. Some of them feel that the Separatists are the ones worthy of their allegiance. Still others are disillusioned by the Council's new status as generals rather than keepers of the peace, and Mace is left as the sole voice of the Council amidst the sea of differing opinions on the proper course of action. After a series of duplicitous and violent actions on the part of Asajj Ventress, one of the Jedi is killed, and all signs point to Mace Windu's involvement as the one who orchestrated this betrayal. Mace begins an investigation in order to redeem his image in the eyes of the skeptic Jedi who now suspect him of murder, and it eventually becomes clear to him that Ventress could only have infiltrated the estate so readily if she'd been allowed access by the proprietor, that of course being Master Sora Bulk, who is revealed to have turned to the dark side, both as a result of his involvement with the development of the Vapad lightsaber style and manipulation by Count Dooku. This issue is an absolute breath of fresh air. There's really nothing I dislike about it overall. There's a lot of good philosophical and political intrigue involved. The character designs are fantastic, the action's great, the artwork's cinematic and fluid. I like how Yoda brings in themes from the actual prequel films, such as his statement in Attack of the Clones when he remarks on the remarkable nature of a child's mind. Yoda reminds Mace that he had doubted the return of the Sith when he was informed about Darth Maul's presence by Qui-Gon Jinn, and later still, Mace doubted the involvement of Count Dooku in the assassination attempt on Padme's life during Attack of the Clones. Yoda teaches Mace to look with the eyes of a child, to look at people around him as if seeing them for the first time, to see the events around him as they are and not what he expects to see, so that when he looks on his old friend, Sora Bulk, he recognizes what he actually is, what he has become. This is definitely one of the high points of the entire series, and this compilation is worth getting just to read this issue. Well, that's it, folks. I hope you enjoyed this look back at the beginning of my favorite version of the Clone Wars story. It's adult, gripping, intelligently written, features fantastic and well-developed characters, and despite a few low points here and there, it's definitely worth your money, and it's a fantastic set of stories that I would recommend to any fan of Star Wars. We'll resume this review series with the next compilation, Star Wars Volume 2, Victories and Sacrifices. Talk to y'all later, guys. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.